The dust was the first thing to irritate Silas Thorne. It wasn't the fine, pale silt of the high desert. This was an alien synthetic cloud, churned up by radial tires that had no business being on his land. It was the color of the manicured topsoil from Silver Creek Estates, a sprawling, stucco and tile monument to new money, built right up to the ragged, unofficial boundary of his family's century-old ranch. The dust settled on his lungs, on the galvanized steel of his hay barn, and worst of all, on the memory of the quiet, undisturbed space his grandfather had fought to preserve. Silas was 55, lean and weathered, with the kind of hands that looked less suited to paperwork than to pulling wire, setting fence posts, or calming a skittish quarter horse. He had a degree in civil engineering he rarely used, and a lifetime of patience he'd thought inexhaustible. That patience had finally run dry on a Tuesday afternoon when the black wagon, driven by the woman he only knew as Brenda from the HOA, cut across the lower third of his northern pasture for the 17th time in 2 months. The land she was cutting across wasn't a road. It was a centuries-old cattle trail that had devolved into a 2-rut washboard path. For the residents of Silver Creek, this path shaved a critical 6 minutes off their commute to the main highway entrance, bypassing the HOA's own winding perimeter road. They had adopted the shortcut with the ease of people who believed rules only applied to them when they were inconvenient. Silas had started politely. First, the standard "no trespassing" sign, hammered into a sturdy post. It lasted 3 days before Brenda Vance, the G-Wagon's owner and the most flagrant offender, knocked it over. Then came the phone call to the Silver Creek Estates HOA manager, a smooth young man named Chad, who listened with the strained tolerance of someone dealing with an irrelevant constituent. "Mr. Thorne, I understand your concern," Chad had droned, the sound of keyboard clicks audible on his end. "But your property isn't officially part of the Silver Creek Covenant. We've advised our residents. Really, if you put up a proper gate or a chain..." "A gate means they just bust through it, Chad," Silas cut him off, his voice low but carrying the authority of a lifetime spent outdoors. "This is private property. It's marked. Your people are driving through a field where my bull grazes, where my grandfather is buried, and where a creek bed could wash out a Mercedes worth more than my annual feed bill. I shouldn't have to build a fortress to keep entitled neighbors off my damn land." The conversation, like all subsequent ones, went nowhere. The HOA's position was clear. Your problem, your liability. The next escalation was physical. Silas dragged 3 massive, sun-bleached cottonwood logs, too heavy for one person to move easily, and laid them across the trail. He chained them together, looping a thick logging chain through them and padlocking it to a rooted juniper. It was a statement, not a permanent solution, designed to inconvenience without causing damage. Brenda's response was immediate and contemptuous. Silas found the chains snapped the following morning, the links cut clean through with what looked like industrial bolt cutters. The logs had been shoved aside, leaving deep gouges in the dry earth. In the middle of the path, a note was pinned to a splintered piece of wood. "Shortcut is essential. Unblock or face litigation over easement rights. Silver Creek Estates legal." Silas felt a cold, hard knot form in his stomach. Easement rights, the oldest trick in the book. There was no official easement, but in civil court, repeated, unopposed use could establish one. He realized he was running out of time and non-confrontational options. He walked the trail that evening, kicking aside the broken sign and the cut chain. He wasn't just angry. He was professionally insulted. He had handled heavy machinery, managed complex builds, and engineered solutions for problems far more complicated than a trespassing suburbanite. To be defeated by a pair of bolt cutters and a flimsy legal threat felt humiliating. He stopped where the track dipped into the sandy wash. This was the most dangerous section, the place where heavy rain could turn the ground into a treacherous, axle-snapping quagmire. It was also the place where the path, for about 50 yards, was completely invisible from his ranch house. He pulled out his phone, bypassing the HOA manager and dialing the sheriff's non-emergency line. "Sheriff's office, dispatch. This is Silas Thorne. Thorne Ranch. I'm calling to report repeated and malicious property damage and trespass on my land by residents of Silver Creek Estates." He detailed the broken sign, the cut chains, and the attempted legal threat. The deputy who finally drove out, a young woman named Deputy Chen, was sympathetic but bound by protocol. "Mr. Thorne, I see the damage," Deputy Chen said, crouching to examine the severed chain links. "But without catching them in the act or getting clear license plate photos, my hands are tied. This is mostly a civil issue now, especially with them invoking the easement word. I can file a report, but the only thing that's going to stop them is something they can't cut through, or a court order." She looked at him, her expression a mix of pity and warning. "Or, Mr. Thorne, a consequence they really can't ignore. Something non-violent, mind you. We don't want anybody getting hurt." Silas stood tall, his shadow stretching long across the path in the twilight. "I understand, Deputy. Non-violent, completely safe. But absolutely, unequivocally unavoidable." He thanked her, watched her cruiser turn back toward the main road, and stood alone. The report was useless. The police were toothless. The HOA was antagonistic. The only tool left was his own ingenuity. He spent the next 2 days in his old workshop, the place smelling of stale oil, sawdust, and acetylene. He wasn't building a boom gate or a spike strip or a concrete barrier. He was designing something that appealed to his engineer's mind and his rancher's deep sense of poetic justice. It had to be undetectable until activated, irreversible once activated, non-damaging. To the vehicle or the driver, humiliating. Enough to ensure the shortcut was never worth the trouble. Again, he pulled out old blueprints for a hydraulic gate system he'd built for the county fairgrounds years ago and began adapting the mechanics. He needed a low-profile trigger, something that could be reset remotely. The key component was a specialized industrial-grade air spring, a simple, powerful actuator used in heavy machinery. He mated it to a custom-welded steel cradle and buried the entire mechanism 6 inches below the sandy soil, carefully disguised by the track's ruts. The trigger was a simple, low-tension cable running almost invisibly across the track and terminating in a small, waterproof sensor box near the juniper tree. The trigger would only activate when a vehicle of significant weight, like a large, high-end SUV, passed over it. The object of the deterrent was simple: immobilize the vehicle, safely, instantly, and completely. The nonviolent weapon he engineered was dubbed the wedge. It was a custom-designed, heavy-duty, wedge-shaped steel plate set on a simple hinge and driven by the air spring. When triggered, the spring would violently push the steel wedge up and out of the ground, just enough to slot perfectly under the chassis of a heavy SUV, lifting the front axle perhaps 2 inches, ensuring the front wheels lifted clear and lost all traction. It wasn't high enough to damage the underside, but it was high enough to create 2 immediate, inescapable problems. The vehicle was now resting on its frame, with its drive wheels spinning uselessly in the air. The vehicle was too heavy for anyone short of a heavy-duty tow truck to move. It was the ultimate, non-destructive immobilizer. It held a car prisoner without scratching the paint or breaking a headlight. He spent all of Thursday and Friday meticulously installing the apparatus. He moved tons of dirt, buried the steel cradle, connected the air lines, and disguised the trigger cable with a scattering of twigs and dead leaves. He ran a hidden line-of-sight signal cable back to his workshop, where a small green LED indicated the system's armed status. By Saturday morning, the path looked as innocent as it ever had. It was a tempting shortcut, a dusty promise of saved time. Silas sat on his porch, nursing a cold cup of coffee, the sun warming his face. He watched the green light on his console. It was 4:15 p.m. when Brenda Vance made her final, most defiant run. She had been late for a charity gala prep meeting, and the traffic on the main road was backed up due to a minor accident. She slammed the wheel, her expensive manicure tapping a furious rhythm. "This is ridiculous. This detour is costing me precious time." She swerved onto the old cattle path, kicking up a rooster tail of red dust, a feeling of self-righteous rebellion surging through her. She sped up, consciously challenging the absent, silent ranch owner. "Let him try and stop me now. He's just an old man with a broken fence." She wasn't slowing down for anyone, certainly not for a patch of dirty, unkempt scrub, Her eyes were fixed on the far end of the trail, where the pavement of Silver Creek Estates shimmered, a promised land of smooth acceleration. She hit the trigger point at approximately 45 miles per hour. The activation wasn't a crash. It was a jarring, definitive thud followed by a sudden, sickening lurch upwards. The sound was mostly the shriek of the G-Wagon's anti-lock brakes engaging as the vehicle's computer system registered a catastrophic loss of control. The car stopped with a final, violent shudder. Brenda's head snapped forward, saved by the tight seatbelt. The engine remained running, but when she instinctively put her foot on the accelerator, the sun was dipping toward the low, hazy horizon, casting long, deceptive shadows across the dust of the Thorn Ranch. For Brenda Vance, standing beside her immobilized, ridiculously expensive G-Wagon, the setting sun only amplified her humiliation. The drone, hovering like a metallic insect, was a witness and a tormentor. Its calm, recorded voice had ceased. But the implicit threat, "You are being filmed, you are trapped, you are paying," hung heavy in the dry air. Brenda's trembling fingers finally managed to connect the call to her husband, Marcus Vance. Marcus, a major player in regional real estate development and Silver Creek Estate's most influential and litigious resident, answered on the third ring, his voice tight with the stress of closing a multi-million-dollar deal. "Brenda, I told you I'm in the final sign-off. This better be fast. I'm stuck, Marcus. I'm utterly stuck. That filthy rancher, that hick, he put some sort of trap in the ground. It's lifted the front of the G-Wagon and the wheels are spinning. I can't move it an inch." Her voice was shrill, losing its polished edge and cracking with sheer frustration. The drone above tilted slightly, as if listening closer. Marcus's deal-closing focus vanished, replaced by cold, professional fury. "A trap? Brenda, you were on his land, weren't you? I explicitly told you to use the main road. We don't need to antagonize him while we're pursuing the easement claim." 6 minutes, Marcus. I was going to be late. And this isn't a trap. It's a ransom. He wants $3,000 to release the car. He has a drone, Marcus. A drone speaking to me. This is extortion. The word extortion resonated in Marcus's mind, not as a truth, but as a strategic tool. The ransom amount wasn't the issue. He spent more on bespoke shoes. The issue was the loss of control, the public humiliation, the drone footage would surely surface, and the catastrophic blow this could deal to their long-term legal strategy. If they paid, they validated Silas's methods. If they submitted, they signaled weakness to the whole community they sought to dominate. "Don't panic," Marcus commanded, his voice turning into the steel-edged tone he reserved for hostile takeovers. "Do not pay him a dime. Do not speak to the drone. Get back in the car. Lock the doors. Call Chad. Tell him the HOA's liability exposure has just skyrocketed, and I need a professional recovery team on that path now." Brenda slammed the door. The expensive German engineering a temporary barrier against the elements and the rancher's mockery. She called Chad, the HOA manager, and relayed Marcus's demands in a venomous torrent. Chad, terrified of Marcus Vance's wrath, immediately scrambled, authorizing the use of an HOA reserve fund to dispatch the nearest tow service. Silas watched the drama unfold on the small, high-definition screen in his workshop. The drone's feed was crisp. He saw Brenda's rising panic, her sharp, dismissive gestures, and the way she retreated into the black box of her vehicle. The green, armed light on his console had turned to a solid, satisfied amber. Immobilized. He knew Marcus Vance wouldn't pay. Vance's entire persona was built on never ceding ground to perceived inferiors. He would try to circumvent the deterrent, either through force or legal threat, before considering paying a trespass fee. Sure enough, 45 minutes later, a standard flatbed tow truck from Desert Star Recovery rattled onto the scene, stopping just short of the immobilized G-Wagon. The driver, a stocky, amiable man named Rudy, took one look at the situation and swore under his breath. Rudy approached Brenda's window. "Ma'am, I'm from Desert Star. The HOA called us. Looks like you got high-centered." Brenda rolled the window down a crack. "High-centered? No, I was deliberately trapped. There's a steel wedge under my car. Just hook up and pull it out. Marcus is in a rush." Rudy knelt down, shining his heavy-duty flashlight under the Mercedes. He whistled low. "Oh, that's not good. See this, ma'am? That's not a rock. That's a fabricated steel plate right under your transmission cradle. And you've got air clearance on the front axle. This is custom work." He stood up, shaking his head. "I can't pull you. Any winch tension will only drive that wedge deeper into the chassis, or maybe even buckle the frame. I need to get a low-profile jack under that wedge and lift the car off it first, then winch it out gently. And I don't carry a bottle jack rated for a 4-ton G-Wagon off-road. Then go get one," Brenda shrieked. "You're wasting time! Call your supervisor! This is a crisis!" Rudy shrugged. "It's not a crisis, ma'am. It's a very expensive parking spot. My supervisor is an hour away and the sun's gone down. I can secure the vehicle, but I'm not touching this until I get specialized equipment, maybe even a dedicated rotator. This ain't no ordinary tow," he called Chad, delivering the grim news. Marcus Vance, listening in on the three-way call, cut in, his voice a low growl of menace. "Rudy, listen to me. This is trespassing on our potential easement. I need that car moved, and I need that device destroyed. Use whatever means necessary, but do not damage the vehicle. I want it done by sunrise. Mr. Vance, with all due respect, I'm not touching that wedge. It looks engineered. It might be hydraulic or pressurized. Messing with it could cause a sudden drop or worse. That rancher designed this to keep people like me from doing exactly what you're asking. This is beyond my scope. You need a structural engineer and a lawyer here before I try to winch a plate of steel out of the ground." Rudy hung up, suddenly deciding the risk wasn't worth the HOA's check. The failure of the tow truck was Silas's first major victory. It confirmed the elegance of his design. The wedge defeated conventional recovery methods, forcing Marcus Vance to escalate the issue. From a simple retrieval to a complex operation that required permits and specialized personnel, time Silas could use. He turned on the drone speaker one last time. "Miss Vance." Silas's voice was clear and amplified, cutting through the silence of the twilight pasture. "Your driver has left. Your options remain. Pay the retrieval fee of $3,000, which covers the cost of my time and the release mechanism's maintenance, or sit there. The choice is yours. I'll be back with my bull at sunrise." "He likes black metal." Brenda burst out of the G-Wagon, rage overcoming common sense. She ran toward the drone, kicking up dust, screaming at the unseen rancher. "You won't get away with this, you criminal! This is premeditated! This is illegal obstruction! My husband is Marcus Vance. He will sue you until you don't even own the dirt under your fingernails. We'll take this whole damn ranch, you hear me? We'll build townhouses on your ancestors' graves." The drone ascended sharply, retreating to a safe distance, then turned its spotlight directly onto her face, blinding her momentarily before the camera focused again. "I hear you, Ms. Vance," Silas replied, his voice chillingly calm. "And you'll find that I'm the last man in this county who fears a lawyer. The law defines this as private property, and I am simply exercising my right to protect it in a non-destructive manner. Sleep well." Silas disengaged the drone and returned to the quiet interior of his workshop. He was momentarily satisfied, but the threat was real. Marcus Vance's mention of taking the whole ranch was not an empty boast. It was a promise backed by an army of high-priced corporate attorneys. Silas had won the battle for the moment, but Marcus was already preparing to change the rules of the war. The next morning, before the dew had burned off the sagebrush, the second wave of the attack arrived. Marcus Vance, driven by a chauffeur in a sterile white Audi, arrived with a team of 3 men carrying surveying equipment, clipboards, and reflective safety vests. Marcus was impeccable in a navy suit, his face set in a mask of contempt. He hadn't paid the fee. He had filed the injunction, the legal complaint, which had been fast-tracked through his connections, accused Silas Thorne of deploying a dangerous, unpermitted mechanism that constituted an attractive nuisance, a threat that would apply to any child or unsuspecting passerby, and demanded immediate injunctive relief, removal of the device and damages. More ominously, the surveying crew, clearly not independent contractors but aggressive, proprietary specialists, began setting up their transits not near the G-Wagon, but further back along Silas's property line, just yards from the buried wedge. They were deliberately and aggressively mapping the route, establishing coordinates, taking photographs, and marking the ground with temporary orange flags. They were manufacturing the paper trail, the visual evidence, necessary to prove the historical use required for a prescriptive easement, preparing for a court battle to officially steal the path. Marcus strode toward Brenda, who looked disheveled and frantic after a night locked in the G-Wagon. The injunction is filed. The court order to remove the device will be served within 48 hours, and they will be liable for the storage fees on my car. You will be compensated for your inconvenience. He pointed at the surveyors. These men are establishing the legal precedent. By next week, that path will be recorded as a temporary access point, and we will install a temporary legal barrier until the court validates our easement. Silas, watching through binoculars from his porch, felt a sickening coldness replace his earlier satisfaction. He had anticipated the legal threat, but not the speed and precision of Vance's counterattack. He was fighting a corporate titan who could weaponize bureaucracy. Vance wasn't just taking the shortcut. He was aiming to take the land that the shortcut was on. Silas dropped the binoculars, the sound echoing hollowly. Amelia Rourke's introduction was less a greeting and more a tactical deployment. Her eyes, the same clear, striking blue that Silas remembered from 2 decades prior, held no sentiment, only focused, strategic intensity. The inheritance closed last night. An hour after Vance filed, Amelia stated, her voice crisp, cutting through the heat. She didn't wait for Silas's reaction, instead turning her attention to the small, advancing army of men currently violating his property rights. If he wants to make this about property definitions, we'll give him a full education. Silas stood rigid, his shock a physical weight. Amelia, his ex-wife, the architect of the very zoning laws that had protected his land from the Silver Creek development years ago. Now, she was literally standing on the front line, holding his defense in a leather briefcase. Amelia, he managed, the name feeling rusted on his tongue. Rourke, what in the hell is going on? Later, Silas. Right now, your ranch is losing 10 feet of land every minute those boys are staking, she said, her tone professional, instantly overriding the personal history. She walked toward the boundary line, moving with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and courtrooms. Not dust and sagebrush. Marcus Vance, impeccable and oblivious, was 50 yards away, issuing orders to his surveying crew. He saw Amelia approaching and sneered, assuming she was a disgruntled Silver Creek resident or, worse, a reporter. Lady, this is a legal matter. This area is under litigation. I suggest you step back beyond the marker tape. Vance's voice was loud, intended to intimidate. Amelia stopped exactly at the boundary line, holding up a heavy, sealed folder. Mr. Vance, you should instruct your team to immediately stop all activities on the Thorn Ranch property. As of 7:30 this morning, your original Silver Creek Estates covenant, the one you signed, has been superseded by a notice of quiet title action filed with the county clerk. Case 24 CV 9011. It includes a temporary restraining order. Marcus froze, his dismissive smirk crumbling into professional alarm. He recognized the language and the severity. A quiet title. Action wasn't about a shortcut. It was a preemptive strike on the fundamental ownership of the disputed ground. Who the hell are you? Vance demanded, stepping forward, his expensive shoes crunching the gravel. Amelia Rourke, counsel for the Thorn Ranch Trust, which now includes my inherited 83 interest in the property, she replied, her eyes cold and steady, and a state land use lawyer who wrote the original zoning that established the official property line, specifically forbidding this easement. Your surveying team, Mr. Vance, is currently committing aggravated trespass and destroying evidence critical to the pending quiet title action. The lead surveyor, a grizzled man named Dale, who knew the rules of land demarcation, immediately dropped his tripod. Boss, she's right. If a quiet title is filed, we stop work. Right now. Marcus Vance's face flushed a deep, alarming crimson. He realized his rapid-fire legal strike had been countered by a precise, devastatingly well-timed counterpunch. He hadn't just sued Silas Thorne. He had triggered an aggressive defense led by the one person in the county who knew the legal landscape better than his own corporate team. And that person hated him. I'll have this dismissed in hours, Rourke. This is harassment, Vance spat out, turning on his heel. Pack up, now! We'll let the courts deal with the criminal obstruction you people call a deterrent. Amelia smiled, a chilling, non-negotiable expression. That's what I'm counting on, Marcus. Now get that white Audi off my new driveway. Back inside Silas's dusty ranch house, the air was thick with unspoken history. Amelia had spread her documents across the battered kitchen table, transforming it into a war room. The injunction he filed, attractive nuisance, is weak but fast, Amelia explained, pulling out a detailed map. It's designed to get a judge to order the immediate removal of your wedge. That's his priority. Free the gee-wagon, destroy the evidence. Our countersuit and the quiet title filing buys us time, but we have to answer his complaint by tomorrow morning. Silas leaned over the map, his strong jaw set. We need to get the car off my land. He's turning a 4-ton vehicle into a permanent, immovable fixture. Amelia met his eyes. The memory of their marriage, its passion and its bitter failure, flashing between them before professional discipline took over. That car is our leverage, Silas. As long as it sits on the wedge, it's proof that the nonviolent deterrent works exactly as intended, fulfilling its duty to protect the property without causing damage. The car is the most expensive, most public sign we have. We don't move it until we force him to acknowledge ownership of the land and pay damages. So what's the move? We file a motion confirming your wedge is not a nuisance, but a necessary, reasonable use of property rights. We argue that the vehicle is safe and that the only danger is his own refusal to pay a standard retrieval fee for a trespass. We use the drone footage as evidence that the vehicle was safely immobilized. A tense silence fell. Silas broke it, addressing the elephant in the room that was the reason she was here and the reason she was driven. You said your vengeance is absolute. Against Vance, what did he do to you, Amelia? Amelia's eyes hardened, staring out the window toward the disputed path. He didn't do anything to me, Silas. He did it to a woman I represented. A small-time developer he squeezed out of her contract, leaving her with nothing but debt. Vance sees people as liabilities to be minimized. I saw the original Thorn land covenant as the last quiet resistance to his kind of greed, and I protected it. Now it's protecting me. She paused, then added quietly, and for the record, the 83 interest came from my Uncle David. He remembered you. Silas nodded, absorbing the complicated past, the shared connection to the land and the mutual enemy. Their alliance was purely strategic, forged in legal necessity, yet carried the emotional weight of 2 lives that had once been one. The hearing was brief, procedural, and brutal. It was held in the County Superior Court, Case 24 CV 9009, Vance's injunction, with Amelia arguing on behalf of Thorn Ranch, Marcus Vance's counsel. A slick corporate litigator named Peterson hammered the attractive nuisance claim, submitting photos of the exposed steel wedge, arguing it was a hidden booby trap designed to injure. This is a custom-engineered device designed with malice to entrap and hold a civilian vehicle hostage, Peterson argued, his voice ringing with theatrical outrage. Amelia rose, calm and commanding. Your Honor, we submit the original blueprints for the vehicle immobilization system, showing that it is pneumatic, non-destructive, and designed solely to prevent further illegal use of private property. We further submit the full drone video, clearly showing that upon immobilization, the defendant, Ms. Vance, was offered a safe release protocol. She then landed her counterpunch with cold precision. We assert, Your Honor, that the true attractive nuisance is the gee-wagon itself. It has been abandoned by its owners, left for over 24 hours on a private cattle path, creating an actual hazard for my client's livestock and impeding the legitimate use of the ranch. The Vances refused to pay the standard retrieval fee, forcing my client to incur storage and security costs. We ask the court to deny the injunction and instead issue an order compelling the immediate removal of the vehicle by a certified recovery service at the full cost of the plaintiffs. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Hayes, saw straight through Vance's legal theatrics. She was less interested in corporate semantics and more in protecting property rights. The court finds that the mechanism, while novel, was deployed solely on private property clearly marked with trespass signage. and appears to be non-damaging to the vehicle, rendering the reckless endangerment claim moot, Judge Hayes stated, looking directly at a fuming Marcus Vance. The motion for the injunction is denied. Then came the twist. However, the judge continued, her gaze now shifting to Amelia. The vehicle must be removed. Mr. Thorne is now obligated to ensure the vehicle is taken to a secure impound lot, which he must select. The initial retrieval and impoundment costs will be paid by the plaintiff, Mr. Vance, and will be assessed at triple the documented local rate due to the specialized nature of the extraction. Marcus Vance's jaw tightened. Triple the rate. He had tried to save $3,000 and now faced paying $10,000 just to move the car to an impound lot that Silas chose. But the final beat was Amelia's. Your Honor, given the documented professional hostility of the plaintiffs toward the Thorne Ranch, we request the court order the retrieval team to be selected by the defendant, Mr. Thorne, and that the retrieval must include the presence of a court-appointed monitor to ensure the safety and integrity of the vehicle immobilization system during removal. Judge Hayes nodded. Granted, Mr. Thorne may select the contractor. Case is adjourned. Marcus Vance, his suit rumpled with fury, stood up and leaned over the railing, his voice a strained whisper aimed at Amelia. You just declared war, Amelia. I bought the company that surveyed your family's land last year. I know exactly how vulnerable you are. Amelia simply collected her papers, her victory a silent, burning presence. Marcus, I wrote the law that established the property line. I know exactly where the bodies are buried, and unlike you, I still know how to build a fence that actually holds. As Silas and Amelia walked out of the courtroom, they stopped only long enough. The victory was hollow. The sight of Rudy's heavy-duty rotator truck, paid for by Marcus Vance, gently freeing the black G-Wagon from the grasp of the Wedge, was immensely satisfying to Silas, but the ranch remained tense. The legal documents Amelia had used to secure the win were now strewn across the kitchen table, their dense language feeling less like a shield and more like a detailed target map for the next volley. Silas watched Amelia as she worked. The same fierce concentration she used to bring to their shared blueprints now bent over her legal briefs. The truce between them was strictly professional, lubricated only by their mutual disdain for Marcus Vance. He won't stop at the car, Silas stated, leaning against the counter, the smell of burnt coffee and dust clinging to him. Vance is a predator. He just lost face and he had to pay triple the fee. He'll come for the land, not just the shortcut. Amelia didn't look up. He already did. That last threat he made in court about buying the surveying company, that wasn't a bluff, Silas. He's trying to exploit an old vulnerability in the Thorne Ranch title. Something from 40 years ago when your grandfather fought the county on grazing rights. She tapped a section of the original covenant she had drafted for the Silver Creek estates. Development. This document, the one I wrote to protect you, is about to be weaponized against us. Vance is smart. He knows the court just validated your right to defend the perimeter. So he's going to attack the interior, the right of the ranch to operate at all. She pushed a newly faxed document across the table. It was an official notice from the Silver Creek Estates HOA, backed by a letterhead from Vance's corporate legal team. Subject: Notice of non-compliance and imminent action regarding nuisance and violations of CCNRs. They're suing us on noise pollution, air quality and visual pollution, Amelia explained, running a tired hand through her hair. Specifically, they cite the operation of heavy diesel machinery, the noise of livestock, especially your bull, Jupiter, and the emission of noxious odors as violations of their covenant of quiet enjoyment. The irony is stomach-turning, but the legal framework is sound. The Silver Creek Estates Covenant, meticulously designed to protect the suburban community's manufactured peace, included unusually strict clauses about adjacent property noise and industrial activity, which Amelia had originally insisted upon to buffer the ranch. Now Vance was interpreting ranch operations as industrial nuisance. They want us to stop using the ranch as a ranch, Silas said flatly. No diesel tractors, no cows, no dust. What happens if we don't comply? They've filed for a preliminary injunction. They want a judge to order you to immediately cease all operations they deem an unreasonable nuisance, pending a full hearing. If we lose the injunction, you can't use your largest hay cutter. You can't move the herd for 2 weeks. You can't even run your well pump after dark if it causes a decibel spike above their threshold. It's a legal siege designed to make the ranch financially unviable, forcing you to sell. The cold, calculated cruelty of Vance's move was stunning. He was leveraging the very laws of suburban tranquility to choke out a century of agrarian life. The emotional stakes suddenly doubled. Vance's second strike didn't just target the ranch. It targeted Amelia's professional integrity and her deepest personal fears, which Silas had played a role in creating. And what about that other threat, Amelia? The vulnerability? Silas pressed. Amelia hesitated, the professional lawyer dissolving for a tense second into the woman Silas knew 20 years ago. It's about the 83 interest. Uncle David left it to me to secure my future after the divorce. But 5 years ago, I invested a large sum, most of my savings, in a small, sustainable land use firm that specialized in rural rezoning. Vance didn't like their influence. He systematically bought their debt, ruined their reputation, and bankrupted the company. He then bought the consulting arm, including all their proprietary land surveys and title histories. She pointed to the section of the complaint, referencing the 40-year-old grazing dispute. Vance's team is now using that private survey data to argue that the original deed description for the Thorn Ranch included a temporary seasonal water right that was never formally recorded, making the current deed, and thus the basis of my 83 inheritance, technically flawed. It's an insane legal stretch, but if he manages to taint the title, he invalidates my stake. And without my partnership, the quiet title action is weakened, and I lose my standing to defend the ranch. It was brilliant, insidious lawfare. Vance wasn't just trying to win the case. He was trying to erase Amelia from the battlefield and exploit Silas's single greatest weakness, his emotional isolation and reluctance to fight. He's trying to get you disbarred. Amelia, or at least financially ruined again, Silas whispered, realizing the depth of her risk. No, Amelia corrected, her voice brittle. He's trying to get me to settle. If I drop the quiet title action, he drops the nuisance suit. He gets the easement, he wins, and I walk away, intact but defeated. But Amelia didn't fold. The memory of the wagon, the arrogant assumption of right-of-way and Vance's cold, financial cruelty toward the small developer she had championed, fueled her. We fight the nuisance case, Amelia decided, pushing herself up from the table. We fight it on his turf, technology and data. We need to prove that the ranch is not only not a nuisance, but that his suburban community generates far more noise and pollution than we do. We need to use the drone for more than just a security camera, Silas. We need a weapon of acoustic and atmospheric data. Over the next 36 hours, Silas adapted his technology. He stripped his drone of its retrieval announcement speakers and outfitted it with an array of sophisticated, high-sensitivity sensors Amelia sourced from a private firm. The drone, now dubbed the Auditor, carried a directional microphone, a particulate matter sensor, and a high-accuracy GPS logger. The plan was simple. The HOA was claiming the ranch was noisy and dirty. Silas would gather proof that the HOA was louder and dirtier than the ranch. Silas launched the Auditor just after midnight. It flew a pre-programmed grid pattern over Silver Creek Estates, meticulously logging the baseline noise, air conditioners, late-night pool parties, loud cars, and the invisible smog of affluent living. Then, at 5 a.m., just as the ranch's operations began, the Auditor flew the same grid over the Thorn Ranch. The contrast was stark. The ranch's noise was loud but localized. Jupiter the bull's low moan, the distant rumble of the well pump. The HOA's noise was constant and pervasive. Amelia compiled the data into a series of irrefutable, time-stamped charts and graphs. The evidence was damning. The average decibel level over Silver Creek at 7 p.m., peak social hour, exceeded the ranch's peak operational noise at 6 a.m. by 15 dB. The particulate matter levels, pesticide sprayers, Leaf blowers' car exhaust were consistently higher inside the HOA than on the ranch. In the final, desperate pre-trial filing, Amelia attached the data. Exhibit D, Acoustic and Atmospheric Survey, Thorn Ranch versus Silver Creek Estates. The night before the critical preliminary injunction hearing, Silas sat on his porch. He was worried, less about the law and more about the man who wielded it. He was worried Amelia was sacrificing her future for his past. Suddenly, a massive, deafening roar ripped through the quiet night air. It wasn't the sound of a passing jet. It was the sound of earth moving. Silas grabbed his binoculars and focused on the edge of Silver Creek Estates, half a mile away. Against the pale glow of the streetlights, he saw it. A towering, hulking yellow excavator and a construction crew working in direct violation of local night work ordinances. They were breaking ground for a new satellite wing of the Silver Creek Estates development, Marcus Vance's latest project. Vance, flush with court confidence and eager to maximize development time, was flagrantly violating the law, digging and hauling heavy rock at 1 a.m., right on the periphery of the existing community. It was an arrogance born of unchallenged power. He was so focused on labeling the ranch a nuisance that he was simultaneously committing an industrial-grade nuisance himself. Silas realized Amelia's legal genius had just handed him a physical weapon. The very drone designed to document the ranch's quiet life was now perfectly positioned to document Vance's noisy, illegal greed. Silas raced to his workshop, firing up the auditor. He would capture the evidence, but this time he wouldn't just send it to a judge. He would send it to the local news affiliate that had been quietly covering the rancher versus HOA spectacle, adding a crucial media beat to the legal war. The drone, the auditor, rises silently into the night sky, its sensors locking onto the deafening, illegal construction site owned by Marcus Vance. The rancher has the evidence he needs not just to defend himself, but to unleash karmic destruction on his enemy's entire corporate image. The county superior court felt smaller and colder than it had for the first injunction hearing. This time, the stakes were existential. The atmosphere was charged not just with legal tension, but with the buzzing undertone of media anticipation. Local reporters, alerted by Amelia's strategic leak of the night construction footage, were waiting in the hallway. The nuisance hearing was no longer a squabble over a shortcut. It was a public integrity test for Marcus Vance. Vance's lawyer, Peterson, led with overwhelming confidence. He painted a portrait of Silas Thorne as an obstructionist anachronism, citing the ranch's noise profile. Jupiter, the bull's deep bellows, the whine of the aging diesel pump, the inevitable dust, as a clear violation of the Silver Creek Estate's covenant of quiet enjoyment. This is not a ranch. Your Honor, Peterson declared, gesturing dismissively. It is a poorly maintained industrial operation that actively devalues the surrounding properties and pollutes the environment. We ask this court to enforce the covenant by ordering an immediate, preliminary cessation of all activities that breach the noise and air quality thresholds of the HOA agreement. Amelia rose, calm and impeccably prepared. She addressed the title vulnerability first, preempting Vance's inevitable attack. Your Honor, before we address the plaintiff's specious claims of nuisance, I must address the claim of flawed title. The 83 interest in the Thorne Ranch, held by myself, is under legal dispute by the plaintiff, claiming an unrecorded flaw from 40 years ago. I submit this affidavit and quitclaim deed. As of this morning, Mr. Thorne has filed a new deed, correcting the alleged technical flaw and reaffirming the full integrity of the title. The issue is now moot. I have standing, and the Thorne Ranch title is sound. Now, let us address the true sources of nuisance. A wave of frustration washed over Marcus Vance, who had relied on that title threat to break Amelia's defense. Amelia then moved to the core of their defense, the data. She projected Exhibit D, the Acoustic and Atmospheric Survey. The court monitors flashed with high resolution, color-coded graphs comparing the ranch's localized noise to the HOA's widespread, persistent sound profile. The plaintiff claims the defendant is a nuisance, Amelia stated, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Our data proves otherwise. The maximum recorded noise level from the Thorn Ranch operation, the large hay cutter, is 78 decibels. The average noise level generated by Silver Creek Estate's landscape crews and late-night social activities is 85 decibels. The particulate matter data shows their air quality is demonstrably worse than the ranch's. The only logical finding is that Silver Creek Estates is a nuisance to itself. She allowed the data to hang in the air, the charts visually indicting the plaintiff's community. Then she delivered the killing blow. But the most egregious violation of the covenant of quiet enjoyment, Your Honor, is not theoretical or historical. It is current. The very night before this hearing, as the plaintiff was demanding my client cease operations, the plaintiff's corporation, Vance Development, commenced illegal, late-night industrial construction at 1 a.m. on the Silver Creek expansion site, located less than 1,000 feet from the nearest residential property. This flagrant, unauthorized violation of both local ordinance and the HOA covenant generated sustained noise levels, exceeding 95 decibels, far above the threshold they seek to impose on my client. She hit a key on her laptop. The courtroom monitors switched from clean graphs to grainy infrared footage shot from high above. It was a silent video of Marcus Vance's towering yellow excavator ripping into the earth, accompanied by the raw, amplified audio recording captured by the auditor. The sound was a jarring, deafening intrusion. Marcus Vance half rose from his seat, shouting, "That's fabricated! That's unauthorized surveillance!" Judge Hayes slammed her gavel, the sound sharper than the recorded jackhammer. "Sit down, Mr. Vance. Ms. Rourke, the source of this footage." The drone, the auditor, Your Honor. The same aerial asset that has now been court-validated as a non-destructive perimeter defense system and is now also a meteorological and acoustic data collector. We have the GPS and timestamps verified. Judge Hayes leaned forward, her expression a mixture of legal outrage and human disgust at the blatant hypocrisy. "Mr. Peterson, your client is suing the defendant for noise pollution, while simultaneously operating heavy machinery at 1:00 a.m. in a residential zone. This action speaks louder than any decibel reading. It is a cynical, bad-faith attempt to leverage the courts for corporate gain. The verdict was swift and devastating. Judge Hayes didn't just deny the injunction. She issued a finding of fact stating that the Silver Creek Estates HOA, under the clear influence of Marcus Vance, was guilty of malicious litigation designed to suppress agrarian commerce. The ruling was a karmic tidal wave. Nuisance suit. Dismissed. The injunction against the ranch was dismissed with prejudice. Corporate cease and desist. Judge Hayes issued an immediate cease and desist order on all Vance Development activities within a mile of Silver Creek for violating local ordinances and the HOA's own covenant. Monetary sanctions. Marcus Vance and the HOA were ordered to pay all of Silas Thorne's legal fees, plus a punitive fine of $50,000 for the malicious nature of the suit. The ensuing media frenzy was catastrophic for Vance. The headline, fueled by the drone footage and the judge's ruling, screamed, "Developer sues rancher for noise while blasting earth at 1 a.m." 2 hours after the ruling, Vance was waiting in the parking lot, his chauffeur leaning against the Audi. He cornered Amelia and Silas, his face white with impotent fury. "You've ruined my schedule, Rourke, but this isn't over. That fine is peanuts. I'll keep filing until you bleed out the legal fees." Amelia smiled, not with malice, but with a quiet, final resolve. "You don't understand, Marcus. The HOA board just voted. They're facing massive liability, negative press, and a hefty fine because of your counsel and your illegal actions. They don't care about the easement anymore. They care about their property values. They're removing you from the board, and they're paying Silas a permanent annual fee for a written, legal declaration that the ranch is not a nuisance, to indemnify themselves against future liability." Vance stared, his empire of entitlement collapsing around him. The community he sought to rule had turned on him, fearful of his toxic methods. "And the shortcut?" Vance snarled, a final desperate gasp. "It's still there. You can't stop every driver forever." Silas finally stepped forward, his eyes locking with Vance's. "You're wrong, Marcus. I didn't have to stop every driver. I only had to stop the one who was arrogant enough to bring the law into my house. And thanks to your spectacular failure, the HOA just made the final decision. 2 weeks later, the final act of this strange war unfolded on the old cattle path. Silas and Amelia stood at the head of the rutted trail. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and iron. The air was quiet, smelling only of dry earth and sage. A crew of workers, hired and paid for by the newly constituted Vance Free Silver Creek Estates HOA, was finishing their work. It wasn't the wedge. It wasn't a chain or a sign. It was a permanent, non-negotiable solution, a 10-foot-tall, aesthetically pleasing earth berm, reinforced with gabion cages and faced with native stone, designed to blend into the landscape and completely block the shortcut. On top of the berm stood a single massive boulder, too heavy for any civilian vehicle or heavy machinery to move. The HOA, in a gesture of total surrender and self-protection, had built the permanent fortress that Silas had been told he was responsible for building years ago. Amelia looked at the formidable barrier, then turned to Silas. The HOA sent a check today. They're commissioning me to write the new bylaw language for the permanent prevention of all further land use conflicts. Irony, thy name is Marcus Vance. Silas took her hand, the calloused strength of his grip comforting the weary lawyer in her. You didn't just save the ranch, Amelia. You saved the land and you saved your career. Why did you really file that new deed this morning after you just secured the title? You didn't have to gift me the land back. Amelia squeezed his hand. I didn't gift the land back, Silas. I gifted the 83 interest to you under the new deed to prove it was free of the title flaw and to give us both a clean start. But the deed you signed in court this morning was a new one, filed 5 minutes after mine. You signed a full transfer of the remaining 85 to the newly formed Thorn Rourke Land Trust. Silas looked down at her, the sudden shock in his eyes. I didn't just file a deed to protect my stake. Silas, Amelia concluded, her voice soft but absolute. I filed a deed to secure our future. The ranch is safe, and we're partners legally and otherwise. We built something that couldn't be cut or broken. We built a consequence,